Welcome back for another entry of this Metal Gear Solid V Explained lecture series. I'm Ross Weaver. Today, this afternoon, I'm going to be going over missions 10 and 11, Angel with Broken Wings and Cloaked in Silence. So if you've been following along so far, you know that I think that missions 1 through 9 are all basically replays of the side ops. We kind of do all 4 of them twice, or you could say we do 4 of them once, then we do the main mission kind of, or the lead up, the prologue to the main mission, and then we do a few more side ops, and then we get back to this. There's a few different ways you can look at it, and I'm not going to tell you which way to look at it, but basically we've been doing side ops up to this point, and now mission 10, this is the stuff that we know is in the main op. Malak is Chico. That's the big headline for this one. If you come away from this with nothing else, I want you to know that Malak is there, and his story is told as a way of speaking of Chico's story. Now, before I get into it, I want to just kind of say as a general note, I've watched a lot of videos about people trying to put Metal Gear Solid V, specifically the Phantom Pain, into like a certain context so that it makes sense, right? That's what a lot of video makers have done. And there's some really good videos out there, and they've really some of them have dug in really well on some of the themes in this game, but nobody really questioned the story, essentially. Nobody really questioned why the story was the way it was. They kind of just looked at what it was and just analyzed it from there, but they didn't go back and be like, well where the heck did this come from? Why do we care about the Hamid at all? I mean, honestly, no, like I'll tell you why, but no, beyond like themes of Russians bad and globalism and blah blah blah. Like the U.S. was quite literally involved in a proxy war with Russia, and Afghanistan was the battlefield. So the reason Hamid are important is because in this whole greater rebellion that I've been speaking of, Big Boss's side versus Zero's side, the Zero side represents the Hamid fighters. They're really representative of America. We know MSF, back in Big Boss's day, used a lot of Russian stuff. Morpho is a Russian gunship, actually. But then Skullface shows up, and he's using American stuff. And Venom always uses American stuff. The Blackfoot helicopter is based off of an American helicopter model. Excuse me. Golly. Excuse me. So the American side is sort of like the Zero side in the whole struggle, and the Russians and the Soviet side kind of represent the other side, the Big Boss side, and that's why Ocelot's on that side, because he kind of stays on that side the whole time, just because I think the way Ocelot sees it is that Zero needs an opposing force at all times, and if nobody else is going to do it, then Ocelot's going to do it, essentially. So, anyways, let's get into Mission 10, Angel with Broken Wings. Now, there's a bunch of prisoner rescue tasks that you have to do here. Oh, let me turn this down because I'm pulling up one of my videos here. Don't want to get this video blocked, even though these are all on YouTube. Anyways, YouTube would do that. So the similarities between Malak and Chico on the surface are just right there. Malak's father has been killed in the war, and his father is the one who we think has given us this mission, but we might find out later that his family was killed even long before this mission could have been given out, and it wasn't his father that gave us the mission. Now, I guess I'll just say it. His father really is Zero, in a way. Like Fox's main, sort of parent in terms of his parasite lineage is really Zero. Zero was kind of the one who was the father hand who was there to actually raise him. You would say, Chico kind of comes from a broken family, Venom Snake, Fox, where his biological father was sort of a no good. And that would be Big Boss, Naked Snake. And so he had another father step in, that's essentially Zero. And Zero was the one who I think helped him really get over all this stuff. But also there was himself as well. So he's called the Angel with Broken Wings. Now, if you go back to Portable Ops and you just know that Null is Gray Fox, let's say, and you're going to go with me that Chico's Gray Fox, well, Null is actually shown as kind of angelic in many ways in Portable Ops. In some of the pictures, he's given literal angel wings, and they don't really talk about it much. I think the phrase "the best we ever had" has a dual meaning not only he's the most capable soldier in like action and in combat, but he's also like morally the best. Like he refuses to do evil acts, essentially things that he doesn't do things that he sees as wrong. He always tries to do what he sees as right. And whereas guys like Big Boss, I think they'll do some stuff and kind of know it's wrong, but they won't care. So this mission, you got to show up and rescue Malak, and there's an armored convoy, and you kind of have to do this mission a couple of different ways if you want to get all the mission tasks done. It's pretty tough to do them all in one run. I think you can do it, but you've got to rescue a bunch of prisoners that are being held here at Khaate Palace, and Malak is here already in a jeep, about to be driven down to Oboo supply outpost. Now, so I know I said earlier, Khaate is like the medical platform, and Oboo is like the support platform. So the medical platform we know on our base already is where some prisoners are kept. That's where Quiet Cell is. This big ruined building here at Khaate Palace, speaking of medical stuff, you might remember the prologue has this big hospital. I think it's 3 stories that we explore. And how many stories is in this ruined building here in Khaate Palace? There's 1, 2, 3, and then a roof, I believe. So this is the hospital, I believe. If not just metaphor, it definitely is it symbolically, and if it might even be the hospital literally. These people we're rescuing here, it's presented as an optional mission task, right? But then Kaz tells you that your conscience will tell you what to do. So like this is all playing up the morality of this character that you're playing as. So that's why this mission's so tough to do all the mission tasks and S rank it all in one run, because you have to save everybody. And I think that that's just commentary on Fox's his personality and who he really is. Now this also has some connections to the Jeep ride with Skullface and the conversation they have, but I'll get back to that in a second. Now, I've been going on about how Fox is the angel, and he's a good character, right? But also, he's the title of the mission is not Angel, it's Angel with Broken Wings. So, mythologically, the angel with broken wings is Lucifer. He's the devil. He's the fallen angel. So that's, I think, where the demon persona comes in and ties in with this whole game, and why there's a focus on Venom's morality in combat. I think he's hard on himself personally for bad stuff he does and stuff that he sees as bad, and so that's why his appearance is reflected like that. Because if this is a VR simulation, well, then your VR self is essentially like we know in the Matrix. What is it? It's a residual self-image. It's a virtual digital creation of your internal self-image, right? And I think that's kind of what's going on with Venom Snake, specifically also with the demon appearance. So he's kind of an angel and a demon. And the broken wings also is a reference to Sahelanthropus. I'll get to it later, but Sahelanthropus is used symbolically to represent Fox as well. It doesn't just represent Fox, but because Sahelanthropus is Sally. We call her Sally, right? And Sally is a girl. That's a girl's name. Technically, Sally isn't Chico, isn't really Fox. Sally, the robot body, kind of represents his parasite lineage. And that really is primarily represented by his parasite mother, the Joy, really Paz, actually. So Sally kind of actually represents Paz in a way. She kind of represents his child self a little bit, but also like his mother side, and it's kind of an Evangelion thing actually, because he's supposed to be inside of it, driving it, piloting it, and all that. And that's what we see Eli doing in this game later on. But I'll tell you right now, Eli is a symbol for Chico. Eli is just basically doing the stuff that Chico's done in the past. We'll get to that when we get to Africa. But yeah, if you've ever wondered how does Metal Gear Solid V relate to Evangelion, there you go. Sally is basically like an Ava, and the pilot, Shinji, sort of is like Chico. So I said Lamar Khaate Palace is like the medical platform. And earlier I said the medical platform is kind of like the admin sector. The admin sector is kind of a combination of command and medical, I believe is what I said. And so here, what I'm trying to say is the medical platform is probably where people were kept. The prisoners that were being tortured probably had to be taken to medical after they were done being tortured, and had to be probably stabilized so that they didn't die, because I think they were doing ghastly stuff to these prisoners. And so this ride goes from kind of the admin sector back to the cells, really, kind of where Oboo is. So it also kind of implies that there's torture going on in the cells, not in the admin sector. Maybe there was torture going on in both places at different times, but it seems that this suggests right here, since Chico Malak is on the move between the admin sector and the cells, this actually recalls, again, the Skullface Jeep ride from the metaphorical admin sector to the metaphorical cells. When Ground Zeroes opens, we see there's a Jeep convoy that's just arrived at or has stopped at the prisoner cells, and it kind of appears like they've just secured Chico in his cell, and the guard outside his cell is like readying his weapon, and Skullface is coming up now that they've got Chico ready to be talked to, and then Skullface comes up. Now remember, this is all recontextualization, so that's not what really happened. That's all like a scripted, event, that's all Hollywood filmmaking stuff. So that Chico there is probably, oh gosh, it's actually kind of hard to say. That actually could be any number of people. But it's essentially like a reflection of yourself, and Snake is you. It's imagine that Ground Zeroes is a VR simulation, and Chico's the one playing it. So Chico is Snake, and he sees himself in the game, and he's mirrored. I think that's essentially what's going on with the whole thing, with the torture and everything. Also, this conversation mission task here relates again to the conversation that you have with Skullface. And you need to listen to this conversation in this mission. If you haven't gone back and listened to it again, it's kind of weird. The guard gets real sympathetic and kind of seems like he doesn't feel like he's doing the right thing. So this whole mission is about morality, like what's right and wrong, even in a time of war. And I think we can all agree, treating a 13-year-old child as if they are an enemy combatant and torturing them and doing all this stuff is probably wrong, no matter what. So yeah, that's Mission 11. I have a note here about prisoners, and I'm trying to think of why I just wrote prisoners down there. That was a great note. Anyways, hopefully there was nothing too important there. So then after that, so that's the Camp Omega sort of mission, the main mission. We go get Chico, and we also have to go get Paz, right? Well, like I've been saying so far, Chico is Paz. They are symbolically linked. So that's why you don't get Paz in this mission. Getting Malak kind of is getting Paz, actually. I think that's why why Malak is in two different locations, because it's as if Chico was maybe kept at the cells, which would have been Oboo, and Paz was kept at the medical place, because we know in the game she's kept in a different area in the admin sector, and so you can liken her cell as to like the medical platform as to Lamar Khaate Palace. And also, Lamar Khaate Palace is like the burned down hospital. You following me? It's fun stuff. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention Sahelanthropus has wings. It literally has white wing tanks, and you can blow them up. You can break them. So, angel with broken wings. There you go. Mission 11, Cloaked in Silence. So this is... Excuse me. 11 is the recreation of the post-mission cutscene in Ground Zeroes, where we fly back to base. Everything seems like it's okay. We've gotten this bomb out of pause, and it was kind of terrible, but... Oh, wait a minute. Our entire base is burned down. So... What do we do in Mission 11? We leave Yaku. We go north of Yaku Oboo, right? And that's where that road is where we've been kind of dealing with stuff during Back Up, Back Down, and other places. You can imagine that this support platform is probably like symbolic of where reinforcements are coming and going on the offshore base. Kind of symbolic of the hangar, perhaps. But essentially, what's going on is this area north of Yaku Oboo that leads to Aabe Shifap ruins. The ruins are there to stand in for the ruined base. So the fight with Quiet happens there as actually kind of a callback to when we fought her there last, the Paz and Zeke fight. So the Quiet fight is actually kind of a rehash of the Zeke fight, but it's also, if you think about it, like I said in my videos, if you compare Quiet to all of her other games' incarnations, there's something in this battlefield for every single one of those events. If she's the Joy, well then there's the bridge. We know down, I guess, as you're entering down to your left in the valley where the river is, the river and the broken bridge is evocative of Seleno Yarsk and the Joy and all of that. The broken bridge, by the way, is the event of the bridge breaking doesn't really happen in Metal Gear Solid 3 at the beginning. It happens symbolically when, during Virtuous Mission, the boss breaks Snake's arm and then throws him over into the river. That's the breaking of the bridge, essentially. The bridge being like the bridge between generations of Special Forces soldiers, essentially. So there's a broken bridge and a river down there. There's a giant, you could say, like sort of a tower that she's on. Her being up that high is kind of evocative of her, I think, being in Zeke. She's got a sniper rifle. There's trees off to the sides, off to the left, which I think is very evocative of the sniper wolf in the field fight. And in the way this whole area is kind of a corridor, kind of reminds me of the first sniper wolf fight in the corridor. And it's also kind of like the Fortune fight, where like she's shooting at you with something that's going to, especially in the extreme mission, it's going to hurt really bad. And if you get hit, you're not going to like it. So you've got to hide behind all of these box-shaped things, essentially. So that's kind of what's going on in the Cloaked in Silence fight. Is it's a callback to all the other fights with the women bosses in other Metal Gear games, and also to some other characters too. You can probably have some fun with that. But so this represents now essentially what's been going on. Is Snake was probably off base to go get Malak, even though, like I said, it's like we're just Lamar Khaate Palace to Yaku Oboo is like our medical and our support platform. But I'm not suggesting that Chico was held on the offshore base at sea while Snake was taking it back. You see what I'm saying? So in a way, Afghanistan doesn't just stand for the offshore base. Parts of it also kind of stand for the onshore base. Like there's a one-to-one thing you can do between these places. And so the terrain between Yaku Oboo and Aabe Shifap kind of stands for that time gap, or that time period, when Snake is coming back from Camp Omega and going back to the sea base. So, also, what happens when we get back to the base? We see the tower is falling, and there's actually a second tower that you see fall. Those two towers relates to the command and the combat platforms that we have in Diamond Dog's base, the two towers. And Mission 11, well, that's two towers. So that's kind of, I think that's part of why Kojima's been playing up the 9/11 reference. It also ties in with the change in worldview that happened in our world after 9/11 happened. It's like there's this change in worldview that happens for Chico after this is kind of his metaphorical 9/11. Happened all the way back in the 70s for him. Poor guy. He never got to really experience the excess of the 80s if he was in 9/11 mode the whole time. So, if you go around Aabe Shifap, since that place represents the destroyed base, you'll find some mosaics on the ground. This whole place represents kind of the conflict that took place here this time. It came to a head. And I don't think in 75, I think Paz was, it's mostly like what we saw. She was in the back of the helicopter, jumped out, and we'll get to that in a second. But I don't think Snake landed on the base and rescued Kaz, because like I've already said, Kaz was probably, the real Kaz is dead already. So who was I saying that was his second in command that was back on his base? That was probably Zero, actually. So the Kaz that we see in the Ground Zero's post-mission cutscene, that was probably actually Zero. And I'll get to it later, but it's corroborated that the old man was in the helicopter with Snake when it crashed in the mission Metallic Archaea later in this game. The helicopter crash is like recreated in separate places at separate times and like piece by piece, and so you kind of have to get one little truth detail from each little piece and put it all together like a puzzle. And once you put it all together, you get this full picture. And the full picture is that Snake Ishmael, old Fox, was in this helicopter with Zero, Paz, and then the younger copy of himself, Chico. And that was probably the only four that were in that helicopter, other than the pilot. Excuse me. They also probably weren't in Morpho, because we know they were working for the American side. So they probably actually back then were attacking whatever the base looked like back then, because it wasn't Cuba and it wasn't American. So it was probably Soviet, actually. And probably had like Ocelot's people and probably had like Soviet armaments everywhere. And so it was like a Soviet-run Cypher base under Big Boss being attacked by a Cypher element that's running with the American side, essentially. So it's this weird proxy civil war, you see. And that sets up all the stuff that we're going to get into in Africa after this, which I'm kind of excited. The Africa story, because this tells us what happened after Ground Zeroes, and this, since I'm telling you right now, this is what happens before. I'm telling you right now, missions 13 through 31 tell us what happens after the mutiny, and it tells us the end, well, not the end, but the fall of Big Boss, the true fall. And it's kind of crazy. We'll get there. So, I've said there's mosaics around there. The mosaics depict stuff. Go look at them yourself. I'm not going to talk too much about it. Just go look at it. They're really cool. Oh, there is one thing I want to mention. When you go look at the mosaics, notice the shield. Okay? Follow the shield. Okay? If you're looking for some homework and something to do, not listening to me talk all about all this stuff more, go trace Sahelanthropus' shield. Okay? That's a fun rabbit hole. Now, Paus's jump is what we are recreating what Quiet is recreating in the post-mission cutscene. I've gone over this ad nauseum in my other videos. I don't want to just retread that ground here too much, but if you haven't seen those videos, essentially what Quiet is doing here, she jumps out and sort of blows up in midair, right? She disappears. She's recreating Paus's jump. So one thing I do want to touch on is that the jump happens over the base, right? And there's people right underneath. It indicates to me that they actually weren't out over the sea. We know that Quiet, when she has salt water thrown on her, it hurts her and it would probably kill her. So if they jumped and blew up over the ocean, the salt water probably would have killed them when they hit the water, even if she was like disappeared. Seems like there's some kind of a reaction there. It gets into how the parasites work chemically, I think. Because even though they are like they're parasites and they're artifice, each one of their forms has limitations. So, anyways, she recreates the jump and the bombing here, but it's over the base. And the only people in the helicopter are Venom, our Snake, and Quiet, because this is the only little part of it you get. And what Snake is doing is kind of recreating what Chico did. You notice he's sitting down and he's not really worried about anything. He's just kind of sitting there and he's just kind of watching. And then Quiet just stands up and goes to the door and looks back at him and then jumps out. So that's probably what Paz did. She probably got up, she just like woke up, like she did in the cutscene, like we see, and then just walked over. And Chico's probably like sitting next to the door, looking out, wondering like what the heck's about to happen next. Because I think they're circling around whatever's left of the base. Because I don't think the whole base had blown up. By the way, I think it was maybe one tower that had gone, and we'd gone over to another part of the base because we know there's multiple platforms and struts and all that. So we go over to probably another part, and he's probably hovering, trying to figure out, are we going to land here? Where are we going to go? Because we know the land base, we can't go there. So what are we going to do? I think eventually Paz jumps, somebody hits the detonator on her bomb, and I'm guessing Ocelot's the one who had that. And I think they had it the whole time. Maybe though, maybe it wasn't Ocelot. Maybe Snake did it himself. There's a possibility, and I'll get into it. It goes with the no bandana timeline, and what if Boss didn't develop Zeke timeline. There's a possibility that Fox would have been forced to take action to recreate Chico turning into Fox, and if Big Boss wasn't going to develop the Archaea and do all that, you see there's this implication that Fox would have had to really play the bad guy, and that may be kind of where the Skullface persona really also comes from. But that gets into alternate timeline stuff, I think. Main timeline stuff is probably mostly what I've been talking about here and what I'm going to keep on with anyways. But yeah, I do think there's two timelines, if I haven't ever said that. Yeah. I think there's a main timeline and then an alternate timeline. And the main timeline and the alternate timeline have differences, like wormholes exist in one of them, like spontaneous wormholes that come from the future. Anyways, it gets into the Lord of Dust and End of Time stuff. Well, I just don't have time for that here. We don't have that time. Where is the time? Anyways, so Paz is quiet as joy. She jumps, blows up. There's people on the deck. She probably actually lands on the deck, like even though she's blown up. Chico probably jumps after her, and he blows up too. And I'm guessing there may have been some kind of a struggle. They may have essentially like blown up, transformed, and he became Venom Snake, and she became Quiet. And I think in the struggle, she probably got away, and he was captured. I'm guessing, because it probably wasn't just Ocelot and Kaz down there. This Kaz, we know Kaz is dead, right? So who is this guy? He could be the real big boss, like the original big boss. It could be Naked Snake. He could have been there waiting. It also could have been like some of his super soldiers. There's a few possibilities. But it's clear like they were hovering, Snake and Zero were hovering over this base, and they seem like they have nowhere left to go. And Snake's like, well, we've got one thing left we can do. We can hit this bomb, basically, and let them transform, because I don't think Boss and Ocelot really knew all of the... Maybe Ocelot knew, but I know Big Boss probably hadn't fully figured it out yet. Otherwise, I think he would have done it, essentially, before now. I think this event is what showed him how it happens. And he went and did it a bunch more times to other child soldiers. And that's what we have to chase down in Africa. So that's exactly how how this all worked out in 75. I don't want to get too much into it because I think that's kind of a mystery. It's a cool event, and I don't want to spoil other people's ideas in their heads. I want you to be, think for yourself. How does that situation play out in your head? I wonder. Maybe Quiet and Chico go like full demon and start like causing like a crazy ruckus, and they cause enough of a distraction that Zero and Snake and the Chopper are able to get away somehow. To where? I don't know. Maybe that's when they go to New York. New York is part of this too, because we know when we're in the recontextualization in the tapes when Skullface is torturing Paz gives up the location, and she's like, "Will this save Big Boss? Will you kill Zero?" And he's like, "It might save Big Boss, and I'll definitely kill Zero, but not for you or anybody else." He's like, "I'm gonna do it for my own reasons," but he's wanting to know where Zero is, and she says he's in 10th Avenue in New York. Well, if Skullface is Fox, okay, and this is being recorded way after the fact, this is like they're probably recording this in the 80s. So this is like an agreed upon lie that we've got in these tapes. So why would they include that location of 10th Avenue in New York? Well, we know New York is related to the Big Shell stuff, right? And the whole Arsenal gear and VR, simulations and like sort of traps, reality traps, right? Because we all thought the ending of Metal Gear Solid 2 was real, right? Like with them in the street and all the people walking by, you didn't realize at first that was a VR hallucination, did you? And that Rose is probably an AI construct that's talking to Raiden there, who's also in a virtual world. Yeah, there's more to it than that. I don't want to get into it, but anyways, in the same way, I think that 10th Avenue was kind of like this artificial trap for Big Boss, specifically to draw him in. I think that intel basically was planted at some point in this 75 operation, probably with Paz, and Big Boss tortures it out of her, and he's like, okay, Zero's at 10th Avenue, and then he probably has a whole arm of his unit go and set up somewhere in like upstate New York or something like that, or actually probably New Jersey. He would probably operate out of Jersey, and then stage incursions into New York City and then into Manhattan, and then scout out this location, and then probably send the poison pin, try to poison and disable Zero, and get him infirmed in this hospital, and then go in and assassinate him. That's essentially why this whole thing in the prologue starts at a hospital with Quiet walking in to assassinate Big Boss, actually. It's another like twist of the narrative. So that's missions 10 and 11. One more thing. Mission 11 has this weird cutscene, right? When you're coming back to base and a jet starts chasing you down. And Quiet helps you shoot the jet down, and she does an amazing sniper shot, helicopter to jet, like unbelievable shot. Why does this happen? Other than like just showing us Quiet's abilities and getting them a good positive story together, you could do that any number of ways. Why is it specifically a jet? Sorry about my hair; it's a little crazy today. Well, it's specifically a jet because remember how I said earlier. Some of those endings of the Ground Zero side ops were actually probably events that happened at the end of the main op, and it was just all showed to us all scrambled and everything. And one of those events is a bunch of jets strafing the base and blowing it all up. Which, like, okay, just imagine in your head Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Okay, it's Cuba. It's not like American land. It's just a little tip of the end of Cuba is Guantanamo Bay. What would happen, you think, if like American jets just flew over Cuba and bombed the shit out of Guantanamo Bay, the American base in Cuba? Do you think that the Cubans, there might be some kind of political ramifications for that? There might be like some, I don't know, maybe some like anti-air systems set up to like guard against stuff like that? You know, it seems more likely that Cuba wasn't in Cuba. That Camp Omega and Ground Zeroes wasn't about Cuba. The Cuba stuff, like I said, was a recontextualization. This all probably happened between the Barranquilla coast and the base that was there on that coastline and the offshore base. So we know the jets probably came from our own base. So the bombing that's shown in Ground Zeroes is relevant because that's probably what happened at the end of this mission. Is the land base was probably bombed completely. So here's what's happened. Snake has taken back this offshore base piece by piece And Big Boss has been staging this resistance on the land base. And then as soon as he gets control of the whole base, somehow Big Boss pulls the rug out from under him, and then Big Boss has complete control of this base, which it's almost as if Boss wanted Snake to take all this stuff, because what he's done is he's laundered Big Boss's entire operation now. So now Big Boss gets to fight on the American side, you see? And now Big Boss gets to sort of play both sides, the Russians and the Americans, against each other, but he can also kind of burn his Russian stuff without too much consequence, and so he blows up his entire base. I think that's essentially what happens here. It's indicated once we get to Mission 13. I'll talk more about it, but it's indicated that from here there's an area of operations swap, so that we're not just this isn't just happening in between the Barranquilla coast and Nicaragua's offshore waters anymore. This might be like an explosion where this conflict goes global and starts happening in Africa, in a bunch of different places in Africa, and Afghanistan. It's probably where the Fox Archipelago has its roots because of its position in a politically sensitive area between Russia and America. Anywhere in the world where there's a politically sensitive climate between Russia and America, Cypher was probably there in Metal Gear's alternate history. So the Seychelles, I say that the Seychelles, we probably weren't there, but we actually could have been at another time. If you look, the Seychelles are kind of close to one thing on the coast of Africa, Mogadishu. And we know there was a huge, kind of an extended conflict in Mogadishu between the Americans and well, there it was the locals, but it gets complicated. But it's kind of implied that those locals and being on the side of bad guys, essentially being bad guys, makes them kind of equivalent to what these the Soviets stand for in Metal Gear Solid V, meaning that it's not that they're Russian specifically, it's that they're Russians in Afghanistan. So the Russians in Afghanistan specifically, they're interlopers, they're like invaders. They're not the true inheritors of the status quo. They're like usurpers. Anyways, yeah, so that's it. Missions 10 and 11. I hope y'all are enjoying these lectures so far. I'm going to keep doing them. I've got notes all the way to Mission 30 already, and by the time I get to Mission 30 for these videos, I'll probably have notes for a lot more, because it gets really complicated, because this whole... I'll just get your mind started on it now, I guess. This whole thing that I'm explaining for Ground Zeroes, it actually also stands in for other scenarios in Liberia, for Solidus, Rhodesia. Oh, and the Rhodesian Civil War ended in 79, so the Rhodesian stuff happens immediately after this. And so it's implied that Frank probably leaves the Barranquilla coast and Nicaragua area and then goes over to Africa and probably operates an identical offshore base off of the coast of Rhodesia, or near Rhodesia, off the coast of Africa. And then is probably from there helping the Rhodesian, probably the Rhodesian National Army, actually. He's probably helping the Rhodesian side. But I'm not sure about that. He could be helping the rebels in that conflict in particular. Fox's story is complicated, essentially, so we'll get into that stuff later. I hope you all have enjoyed. I may do another one of these later tonight. This one probably won't upload until tonight, and so if there's another one that I do, it won't upload till tomorrow. But anyways, hope you all have enjoyed these so far. I'm going to keep doing them. Keep tuning in. Peace out.